Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 60. Lord Krishna teases Queen Rukmini, text 44. So this is where Rukmini is answering Krishna. Tasya surachuta nipa bhavato padishta Srinam griheshu kadago swavidala britya Yat karna mula marikarshana no payayad Yujmat kata mridavichincha sabashugita Tasyaha, of her, Syu, let them become the husbands. Achyuta, O infallible Krishna. Nirpaha, kings. Bhavata, by you. Upadishtaha, mentioned. Strinam, of women. Griheshu, in the homes. Kara, as asses. Go, oxen. Shva, dogs. Vidhala, cats. Brityaha, and slaves. Yat, whose. Karna, of the ear. Mulam, the core. Adi, your enemies. Karshana, O you who vex. Na, never. Upayayat, come near. Yushmat, concerning you. Kata, discussions. Nidda, of Lord Shiva. Virincha, and Lord Brahma. Sabhashu, in the scholarly assemblies. Gita, son. BBT translation. O infallible Krishna, let each of the kings you name become the husband of a woman whose ears have never heard your glories, which are sung in the assemblies of Shiva and Brahma. After all, in the households of such women, these kings live like asses, oxen, dogs, cats, and slaves. Yeah. So the way Srila Prabhupada translates this in Krishna book are these husbands, my dear Lord, you advised me to accept one of the princes, such as Shishupal, Jarasandha, or Dantavakra, but what is their position in this world? They are always engaged in hard labor to maintain their household life, just like the bulls working hard day and night with an oil pressing machine. They are compared to asses, beasts of burden. They are always dishonored like dogs, and they are miserly like cats. They have sold themselves like slaves to your wives, to their wives. Any unfortunate woman who has never heard of your glories may accept such a man as her husband. But a woman who has learned about you, that you are praised not only in this world, but in the halls of the great demigods like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, will not accept anyone besides you as her husband. So that's Srila Prabhupada's translation in Krishna book. BBT, purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, these fiery words of Queen Rukmini's are a response to Lord Krishna's opening statement found in text 10 of the chapter. The Supreme Lord had said, my dear princess, you were sought after by many kings as powerful as the rulers of planets. They were all abundantly endowed with political influence, wealth, beauty, generosity, and physical strength. According to Sridhar Swami, Queen Rukmini here speaks with anger, pointing her index finger at the Lord. She compares the so-called great princes to asses because they carry many material burdens, to oxen because they are always distressed while performing their occupational duties, to dogs because their wives disrespect them, to cats because they are selfish and cruel, and to slaves because they are servile in family affairs. Such kings may appear desirable to a foolish woman who has not heard or understood the glories of Sri Krishna. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur adds that such kings are like asses because their wives sometimes kick them, like dogs because they behave inimically towards outsiders in order to protect their homes, and like cats because they eat the remnants left by their wives. Tasyaistyur achuta nirpa bhavato padishtaha Srinam graheshu karago shra vidhala brityaha yad karna mulam adikarshana no payayad yushmat kata madavatincha sabashu gita. O infallible Krishna, let each of the kings you name become the husband of a woman whose ears have never heard your glories, who are sung in the assemblies, which are sung in the assemblies of Shiva and Brahma. After all, in the households of such women, these kings live like asses, oxen, dogs, cats, and slaves. So Krishna was telling Rukmini, why don't you marry one of these guys? They're so qualified. And from a material point of view, they are very qualified. And Rukmini says, and these very qualified kings, they're very rich, they're very intelligent, they're very strong, they're very competent. They're just like a bunch of asses and oxen and dogs and cats and slaves. They're just useless. Let some woman who hasn't heard about you marry them. But why would I want anything to do with it? And she's angry. And interesting here, because Krishna's giving an instruction. Basically, go do this. And his wife, Rukmini, his chief wife, obedient wife, actually, she's saying, no, I'm not following this instruction. I'm not going to marry someone who's like a donkey or a cat. And she's angry at him for giving her this instruction. Sometimes people think that spiritual life means, the Lord tells you what to do and you just say, yes, sir. And you do it, but that's not always the case. Of course, this was a loving exchange between the supreme husband and the supreme wife. What I wanted to look at here is many people have the misconception, even some of our leaders in our Hare Krishna movement, unfortunately, that the Bhagavatam only is speaking from the point of view of men and is telling them to be detached from their wives, that women are by nature just materialistic and dragging you down to materialistic life, and that if a man's intelligent, that he's going to be detached from women. Certainly the Bhagavatam says that, but the Bhagavatam also says the same thing from the women's position about men. And not as often, that's a fact, but it does say that. And here is one of the prime places in the Bhagavatam, Rukmini, today's verse, and verses that follow as well, where she says, being attached to some materialistic man in this world is useless. Why would anyone do that? And if somebody would do that, that's only because they don't know any better. They don't know about you. Right? Just like, I remember when I was a kid, we'd eat this stuff called American cheese, which is only partially cheese. It's cheese mixed with chemicals. But once you had real cheese, then you're not going to be interested in this stuff anymore. Or I remember the first time I had a tree-ripened, freshly picked peach. And then the store-bought peaches that are flown in from Chile with the picked green and ripened on the boat, they didn't taste very good. Once you have your own vegetable garden, you're picking your own tomatoes, you're picking your own zucchini, then you go to the supermarket and you don't want to buy that stuff anymore. So maybe Rukmini's saying, okay, if someone hasn't heard about you, who's glorified by Shiva and Brahma, if someone doesn't have Param Drishtam Nivartate, then maybe they're interested. in these dogs and cats and slaves as husbands. So Shastra is also teaching detachment of women from the world and detachment of women from men. So I wanted to look at kind of three categories of ways of detachment of women. One is women who never marry, who only accept Krishna as their husband. Another is of women who do marry. They do ostensibly accept another jiva as their husband, but not really. Really, they're only accepting Krishna as their husband, and they're just externally being someone else's wife as a service to Krishna, their actual husband. And then people who do, as devotees, they do think, okay, this other jiva is my husband. But at a certain point, they transition to seeing Krishna as their husband. So the first category is women who just literally never marry. Now, it's interesting that Srila Prabhupada very much encouraged marriage. You know, when he started his movement, he really encouraged his disciples to get married. And Prabhupada has one purport in the first canto where he talks about that marriage basically should be compulsory. We see in modern society where illicit sex is rampant, that, you know, people are going through, many people, I'm not sure the percentage, but many people are going through so many illicit relationships, you know, often starting when they're a teenager. But, you know, it's actually very traumatic. We form tight emotional bonds to people with whom we have a sexual relationship. And to have these formed and then broken and formed and then broken and formed and then broken. And then there are sometimes children produced who are then, you know, between parents and families, and so much childhood trauma. I mean, just so much trauma, relationship trauma and childhood trauma. And it's really a very messy situation in modern society for a lot of people. You know, there's a lot of people, they're 35, 38, and they still haven't found their life partner, and they're in great anxiety, or they've gone through so many terrible relationships that have really hurt them emotionally, practically, financially, in so many ways. So there are people who decide, there are, you know, although the prescription generally, the solution for this generally in the Shastra and in all the old cultures of the world, I mean, until like maybe 1960 or so, was that people should marry. I mean, in general, it was like that. Most people married by the time they were 20, 25. People were married. But there are people who decide, you know, I don't want to buy into this way of life, but I'm not going to become simply jumping from one partner to another to another. I'm going to accept Krishna from the beginning as my husband. I'm going to be a renunciate. And this concept is there not only in the Gaudiya Vaishnavas or Vaishnavas in general, but it's there in all the religions of the world. So we have in Christianity, we have the nuns who consider themselves brides of Christ. Many of them even wear wedding rings, and they consider that they have married God, and therefore they're not going to marry anyone in the world. And there are also, of course, Buddhist nuns. So when we're traveling, I can't remember where I was, but I was in some airport where I was seeing many Buddhists, many Buddhist monks and nuns. And of course, we have in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, Srila Rupa Goswami talks about in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, a fair-faced girl named Chandrakanta. And it was explained, how did she attain love of God? It said that she did not want to marry anyone. She always just thought of Krishna as her husband. And she danced all night in order to please Krishna, her husband. And Krishna was so pleased with her that he gave her his benediction, and she immediately achieved love of God. So this is a very wonderful situation. And although Srila Prabhupada didn't encourage this in general, Prabhupada in general encouraged that women should get married, he did say that there should be some provision for women who didn't want to marry. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati also actually arranged an ashram for women who wanted to not marry and live a life of austerity. And it was something that our acharyas encourage for those who are actually able to do it. You don't want, we've had people, I've seen many people who say, yes, 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 they're 20 years old and I'm just going to marry Krishna. I'm not going to have any relationship with anyone else other than Krishna. Krishna is going to be my significant other, my partner, my spouse, everything to me. I'm not going to have a family in this world. And then they get to be, 25 or 30 and some good-looking man comes along and they're finished and they're just swept off their feet. And I've seen this happen many, many times, that they're not really fixed in this decision, but it is certainly possible. I have my good friend Prasanta, who runs the VIHE in Vrindavan, the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education. And she was always determined, I am only going to have Krishna as my husband. So she was a beautiful young woman, and she was always being asked by various devotees or the temple presidents, but people in general, are you married? Are you going to get married? And she found that if she said to people, no, I don't want to marry anyone in this world, I just want to marry Krishna, that they would argue with her. They would give her a hard time. They would say just what I said, that so many people say they're going to do this, but they actually can't maintain it. And better to just realize you're going to marry anyway. So why not do it when you're young and in good health and so forth? And, why not actually do it at the proper biological time? Because you're going to do it anyway. And she was really distressed that she was having to, argue with these people and kind of defend her desire. And then one of her friends made the suggestion to her that when people ask you, are you married or have you found someone? Then you should just say, well, not yet. And then they'll leave you alone. So that's what she did. And she did that for many years until she got old enough that people stopped asking her the question. And then she shaved her head and put on white. I have another good friend in Vrindavan, Srimati, Devi Dasi. Before joining the Hare Krishna movement, she was in training to be an acharya in Astanga Yoga. She was an accomplished mystic yogini. And then she joined the Hare Krishna movement. And she also was very, very determined that there's no question that I'm going to have a family or a husband. I'm simply going to accept Krishna as my husband. And actually, her renunciation and her detachment from romantic activities was so obvious to everyone that even when she was a fairly young woman, she was put in charge of training the brahmacharis in Mayapur, because everyone could understand. I mean, it's something like Srila Sukadeva Goswami, that Srila Sukadeva Goswami, when he was only 16 years old, he was wandering naked, and young women who saw him could understand that he had no sexual attraction, that he didn't have any lust. And therefore, even though they were bathing naked, they didn't cover themselves, because they could understand that this person who's passing doesn't see any attraction in us. So it was the same kind of with Srimati, that even though she was a young woman, she was training the brahmacharis. Now, that's not something generally that should be done. But in her case, she had this kind of detachment. Of course, we also have a very famous person in our Gaudiya Sampradaya, Gangamata Goswamini. Gangamata Goswamini was the only child of her parents, and her parents were the king and queen of their particular area in India. So as their only child, she was the heir. She would become the queen. And she wasn't interested at all, but to please her parents, she took up the responsibility briefly. So she became the queen briefly, but then she says, this is not what I want to do. I don't want to do anything within this world. And so she renounced the kingdom, and she went and found a spiritual master who said to her, look, you're a princess, you're a queen, you're used to luxury, you're not going to be able to just take up a life of devotion. And she said, no, I'm determined. He said, well, then, you show that you're determined. So she and one other, a lady companion, they performed austerities at Radhakund. And one can still go, if you go to the Ghat, Manasapavana Ghat at Shamakund, there's a temple there where Gangamata, and I think her friend was named Lakshmi Priya, where they performed austerities there by the bank of Shamakund and Radhakund. And of course, later Gangamata Goswamini moved to Jagannath Puri. She was one of the initiating spiritual masters in our movement. She even gave initiation to the king of Jagannath Puri. But she was called Goswamini because she never married. She always just accepted Krishna as her husband. So in order for a person to take this path, they have to, as Queen Rukmini is saying in today's verse, they have to really know about Krishna. It can't be just some theoretical thing, I'm going to marry God, and who's God? I don't know who God is. I don't know anything about God. You have to actually know something about Krishna. There has to be some actual attachment to Krishna. I asked this one gentleman once, he's a Franciscan monk and actually quite a leader in the Catholic community. He's written a lot of books, very famous speaker. 100,000 people will come to his classes. And he ended up becoming interested in Krishna consciousness. Long story how that happened. Basically, his brother had cancer and was put on a vegan diet. And in sympathy with his brother, the other family members also took up a vegan diet. And while he was not eating meat, fish, eggs, he saw a billboard about chanting Hare Krishna. And he decided to try chanting Hare Krishna, and it transformed his life. So he's still very active in the Catholic community, but he's become a devotee of Krishna. And a lovely, lovely gentleman. Anyway, one time when I was speaking with him, I was asking him about his having taken up a monastic life. And he said, I am not celibate as a discipline. I am celibate as a charisma. So I looked up what the Catholics means by charisma, and it means a gift. So just to be celibate and renounced as a discipline is dangerous because it may involve some sort of repression or suppression. And therefore we see so many examples of people who take up, men or women who take up celibacy and renunciation as a discipline, but end up getting involved in some romantic affairs later on. Whereas when it's a gift of the Lord, then a person can actually maintain it. Of course, one can throw away one's gifts, but then one can maintain it. All right, then we're going to look at the next category, and that is women who do apparently accept some husband in this world, but with the mood that Krishna is my husband, and taking care of this husband in the world, taking care of children and household and so forth, is my service to my real husband. So this is actually the best path for the vast majority of people. The vast majority of people, myself included, we're not in a position, especially when we're young, to say, I'm going to walk away from the world. I'm not going to do anything in the world. I'm not going to have a romantic partner. I'm not going to make money. I'm not going to have a house. I'm just going to live in a cave somewhere and engage in spiritual activities. This kind of mood is it looks very, romantic. But Arjuna kept arguing with this with Krishna. He said, let me just walk away from the battle and just let me live by begging and live as an austere person. And then Krishna said, fine, okay, well, this is what's going to be involved. And as soon as he explained what was actually involved to Arjuna, Arjuna's like, no, I don't think I'm going to do this. This path of apparently living like a worldly person while having a spiritual consciousness is very much exemplified by our Acharya Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, my home is your temple, my wife, my children, and he had like 10 or 12 children. My wife, my children are all your devotees. They're all your servants. They're all your parts and parcels. The money that I'm making is the money to maintain your household. And I am also one of your servants. I am doing this as a service to you. So this is that we may see that within us, there are still desires like this, that I have a desire to have a physical, emotional relationship with a romantic partner in this world, or I have a desire to produce children, or I have a desire to have money, and I have a desire to have my own place, and I have a desire to do something in the world, to make a difference in the world, to contribute in the world according to my talents, that these desires are there. And therefore, I want to use those desires in Krishna's service, what we call yukta vairagya. And in fact, Srila Rupa Goswami says that if we falsely pretend to give up these things, then that kind of renunciation will not help us. And in fact, will make our heart harder and harder. And, I've certainly seen this with artificial renunciation. So with this concept, one is thinking, my real person that I have love for is Krishna. Srila Rupa Goswami gives the example of a married person who's having an adulterous affair. So they're doing all of their, they're behaving even more nicely with their spouse and children to hide their affair, but they're always thinking of their illicit lover. Another example that I've experienced personally is when a woman is pregnant, she's always thinking about the baby in the womb. She's always thinking, is this thing I eat or drink or do, is it going to be good for my baby? So she appears to be just working in the world and operating in the world, but her consciousness is on her child. So one may have a husband, or, here we're looking from the point of view of women. So one may have a husband and children and home and job, career and car and so many things. But one is always thinking, Krishna, this is for you. Krishna, this is for you. When we were meeting with Srila Prabhupada in 1976 in New York, so our oldest son was sitting on my lap. He was about 1.5 years old. And Srila Prabhupada was talking to my father, and he pointed me out, and he said, just like this mother is loving her child without expectation of return in the same way one should love Krishna. And my father said, will loving her child help her to love Krishna? And Prabhupada said, no, but loving Krishna will help her to love her child. When I actually see that Krishna is my husband, then my relationship with my family members, with my colleagues at work, with people in general, completely transforms. And the reason for that is when I have Krishna as my husband, I am going to feel completely satisfied. I'm going to feel that all of my desires are fulfilled. I'm going to realize the wealth of joy and the wealth of knowledge and eternity within myself, which then means that I won't feel that I need anyone else to meet my needs. I will feel that Krishna is already meeting my needs. I already have everything I could need or want in my relationship with Krishna, and therefore I don't have demands on others. And therefore I'm not going to become disturbed when other people don't meet my expectations. Because no matter how loving a husband and wife are, sometimes, they're not going to meet our expectations. Sometimes they're going to disappoint us. That's just the reality. No matter how much love and care we pour into our children, they will sometimes disappoint us. But if I'm full with Krishna, then I'm able to deal with everyone just on the platform of love. I don't need anything from them. And I can just serve them with this love I feel for Krishna will pour out of me. Like David said in the Psalms, my cup overflows. So one will be so full that there's so much love to feel for everyone. And one is therefore dealing with everyone, our job, our home, our family members, whatever, just out of love. We don't have expectations that Krishna is going to meet our needs. He is. We're actually experiencing it. Now, for most people, they're not going to be able to act on that platform from day one. It's going to be a gradual transition. So most people at first will enter into careers and family and home and so forth with the idea that I'm offering this to Krishna, but without fully experiencing that Krishna is my husband. Krishna is my everything, not just my husband. Bhaktivinoda says, Janaka Janani Daitatanai, Prabhu Guru Patituhu Sarvamai. You are my mother, my father, you are my husband, my son, you are my guru, you are everything to me. So at first that may just be a theoretical concept that we're working on. And we do put expectations on the other people around us, and we do get frustrated with them, and we do get disappointed with them, and we do make demands upon them. And things are that to some extent we're struggling like any materialist would struggle in our relationships in our life. But we have the goal of having, of really feeling that Krishna is my everything. And gradually, as we engage in the process of bhakti, our relationships with our partner, our relationships with children, with mother, with father, with siblings, with friends, with colleagues, with employees, with customers, with everybody, with our pets, with everything, becomes transcendentalized. Now, at that point, a person may, when they get older, the children are grown up. There are women and men who say, okay, we're going to enter into external renunciation. Where this is called the Vanaprastha ashram and then the sannyas ashram, that one says, okay, we're no longer going to be engaged in sexual affairs, in monetary affairs, even the internal feeling in our heart that Krishna is everything. We're going to now live as renunciates externally. So that may also be there, and that could be husband and wife together, or it could be husband and wife separately. So I have a very good friend of mine who has done this fairly recently. So she had a husband and children, and then at a certain point they became renunciates, and now she says, well, Krishna is my husband. And it was very interesting. She was asked to do a ceremony at one ISKCON temple, and the devotee said, well, only women who are married with living husbands can do this ritual. And he said, are you married? And she said, yes. And is your husband alive? And she said, yes. And she told me, she said, I was thinking that I'm married to Krishna and he's alive. She said, I wasn't thinking about my jiva husband. So what does it mean that we see Krishna as our husband? This is true, of course, also for those of us who are currently in male bodies. And this is really the two aspects of surrender, that I see Krishna as my protector and as my maintainer. Even if I'm working for a livelihood, or I'm a trust fund baby, or however I maintain myself, I see that actually Krishna is the one who's maintaining me. He may be maintaining me evidently, externally through my work or through my family or something, but ultimately it's Krishna, and we know that because he can take it away at any moment. My ability to work, my intelligence to work, my connection with my family, whatever it is, my pension, all of that has to have the grace of the Lord. And actually, Krishna is the only one maintaining me. And that Krishna is my protector. The word husband as a verb means to protect. So Krishna is protecting. I cannot ultimately protect myself, nor can anyone else ultimately protect me. We just had the appearance day of Lord Nrsingadev, and there Prahlad Maharaj says that the boat cannot necessarily protect you. Parents cannot necessarily protect you. Right? We see that. We see children get sick or injured, and the child dies despite the parents doing their best, despite the doctors doing their best. Ultimately, Krishna is the protector. So we have this mentality, whether we never get involved in things externally in the world, whether we get involved in things of the world, but from the beginning with a consciousness that Krishna is my only protector and maintainer. He is my only everything. This is just a service. Or whether we gradually come to that position, a step by step, that, yes, I'm working in the world as a devotee, trying to spiritualize my worldly activities, and gradually I am doing so. Our only satisfaction will come when we see Krishna as our protector and Krishna as our maintainer, Krishna as our everything. And then once we have that love for Krishna, we have that love for all living entities. So we have some time for questions. And I've noticed some things have coming in the chat, but I haven't been looking at them. So we can take a look at what's in the chat. Equal opportunity bashing. Why are all forms, so Jeffrey asked this question, why are all forms of detachment for women resultant in a form of marriage? The social construct is inherently misogynistic, and this is limiting to women and their spiritual connection with Krishna. Why not able to find the truth in something other than Madhurya Ras? Yeah, well, that is true. Janaka Janaki Daita Tanai Prabhu Guru Pati Guru Tuhu Sarvamai. See Krishna as your child. See Krishna as your master. See Krishna as everything. Why are we talking about that here? Because that's the verse today. So I have a very firm determination that when I give class on a particular verse and purport, I really try to focus on that particular verse and purport. And when you focus on that particular verse and purport, then naturally there's other things you're not talking about. And if you try to talk about everything you could possibly talk about in relationship to the topic, there is no way that you would complete the class in the requisite amount of time. So you would all be here for the next 10,000 years. So yes, it doesn't have to be marriage. However, having said that, generally embodied living entities have a desire for sexual behavior. That's baked in biologically to our physical bodies for the vast majority. There are some human beings who just don't, they're called asexuals, and they really have absolutely no desire, but that is unusual. Or somebody might have some medical condition or something like that. They have no libido. But the vast majority of us do have such desires. And those desires, if you haven't already noticed, it's not a question of being misogynistic. It's a question of biology. Those desires for everyone, men, women, intersex people, whatever, are very strong. And they tend to form kind of the nucleus of what's motivating us and driving us in this world. So therefore, there's this emphasis. And I mean, when I was getting my PhD, we were talking about ethics, and ethics applies to a large extent to sex and money. Those are the two main areas of scandal. So it's quite an important aspect of life to deal with, because it stretches such a strong desire and gets people into so much trouble. But yes, one should see Krishna as one's everything. Absolutely. Very good point. And I appreciate that you brought this up. Okay. Next one. So we don't have expectations with others because we have expectations that Krishna will meet our expectations. No, we just know he will. Eko bahunam yo vidadati kaman. And however he meets those expectations, we're satisfied with. Sampade vipade jivane madane. Krishna, I know that everything you're doing is good for me. Now, we may not be able to be at that platform from day one, but to know that getting to that platform is what we're really looking for. If I can have all these relationships with Krishna, then why have all these relationships on material practical life? Exactly, Poppy. If you can do that from day one, you don't need to enter into these others. But not everybody can do that from day one. What are the purposes of these relationships if I can have Krishna in all forms of relationships? Well, the purpose is to spiritualize my material desires. If I don't spiritualize them, they're going to get me into trouble. And another purpose is service. There's a need in the world to take care of other living entities for Krishna and to produce nice children for Krishna. There's a need for that. There's a need for people to run businesses and agriculture and governments and schools and plumbing businesses for Krishna. Okay, then we have one from Prasad Modini. Every time I listen to a senior devotee read Prabhupada's books, this concept of Krishna's everything maintainer and protector sinks in, but as I go about in daily life, I forget and ego takes over. Yes, so that's what I'm saying. It's a gradual process. Do you have any practical tips on how this knowledge remains in my consciousness all the time? That will happen when you're at least 50% free of your anartas. So according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, we will not be able to be steady as long as we have these various attachments. But as by chanting, taking prasadam, reading the books, as our attachment gets down to 50%, then we will be steady. Now, even that steadiness is going to require some mental discipline where we'll have to pull our mind back to Krishna. When we get to the point of a Shakti, which is right before perfection, then our mind will automatically go to Krishna without any effort on our part. Will happen. Don't worry. Rake Krishna, Mare Ke, Mare Krishna, Rake Ke. Yes, that's if Krishna wants to save me, no one can kill me. If Krishna wants to kill me, no one can save me. And this is a mantra you can remember, to help you remember this all the time. Get a little mantra. I mean, I have my little mantras. In the end, it will all be okay. If it's not okay, it's not the end. Okay. Andal and Mirabai. Yeah, I don't think I have time to stay after class. I have a lot else going on. Okay, we have just a few minutes. Some of the people who've raised their hand. So Mr. iPhone has raised his hand.
Okay. Hi, Krishna, Mother Urmila. Very nice to see you again. Thank you for giving
Hey,
class.
Krishna.
Well, I wanted to take a quick second to plug your book, Career Dharma, and maybe formally request if you'd like to maybe come to New York sometime and give us some discourse on how we can arrange our lives according to our natures and in relation to service to Krishna.
Oh, that would be very good. Also, my co-author Rukmini and I, we're trying to find ISKCON centers that want to apply not only the principles of career dharma in helping individuals work according to their nature, but in the relationship between the four fields in that center. So right now we're discussing this with Gita Nagari, with Radhadesh in Belgium, and with New Govardhan in Australia to actually have a center that puts these principles of career dharma into effect, not just on an individual level. So yeah, I mean, of course, I always like to come to New York. It's
Wonderful.
I'm a native New Yorker, probably know.
Maybe we can add a Bhakti Center to that list.
Oh, and thank you for saying nice things about my book. You can also write a review on Amazon.
Sounds
Please,
good.
please. Okay, Bima, yes, you had a question. Bima, who is now just a black rectangle, but your hands.
Yes, that's what I am. I'm a black rectangle. That's my
No,
heart.
you're not a black
Um,
rectangle. You're an effulgent, beautiful soul. And how may I serve you?
Speaking of effulgent, beautiful souls, that was me asking about Amdal and Mirabai. I was introduced in college when I was taking poetry classes, and that was one of my introductions into Krishna consciousness, just the whole idea of this. It was in Christian mysticism. And then the teacher, the professor, went on to explore a bit of Eastern mysticism and was speaking about that sort of conjugal vow that nuns take. As you said, they wear a wedding ring, and then by expostulating on that concept, he mentioned Rumi, and then of course Andal and Mirabai. And I remember reading wonderful translations of their poetry, and I just wanted to say that talk about this. Oh, you can't, repress your sexuality in this world, or not. You can't, but it's a very, very hard for people who are not libidoless to do such a thing, and it can become.
It actually is not advised. Repression of sexuality is a really bad.
Exactly. So my whole thing is that, or my point here was that when we see in the poetry of Andal and Mirabai, you have no repression, but you have that dovetailing into the art of expression, whether it be music or poetry or deity worship or service. Whatever it is, it can be done in such a way, according to that. I have no experience of this, of course, but according to what I see reflected in their works, even in the dancing in kirtan, even in the dancing in the Sufis, the spinning, it is sort of, as you said, I can't remember the devotee Vaishnavi who danced all night for Krishna, that this wanting to share intimacy can be done and expressed in so many different ways other than that gross sexual, but that sharing of intimacy in a very, very fulfilling reciprocal way with a artistic expression towards Krishna, that of course it seems like that Krishna reciprocates with a very, like Andal in the end just gave her life gave her life to, I can't remember the deity, but she merged into the deity. Mirabai herself would only marry Krishna, only had Krishna in her heart. And of course, there's a big story behind that, and it's rather engaging. And that nurturing of our hearts towards Krishna is present in our movement. That there's so many different ways in which to approach Krishna, and in every single way, whether it be in prayer and especially in chanting alone in japa in the middle of the night, that yearning, that lobha is there and available for all of us, men and women included, to experience that intimacy which is a part of our nature, that intimacy being the desire to love and be loved, is at the foundation of it all. And that it isn't just about sexual, but it is about intimacy. And I just wanted to express
Yes, well,
that we should not be
ultimately,
afraid.
our biological sexual urge, which of course on a biological level assures the continuation of our species, is ultimately an expression of our spiritual desire for love, to be loved and to love. And it's our spiritual desire for ultimate oneness and difference. Thank you very, very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.